All right, so we're just going to go through pre-drive checks and adjustments and the walk around. If you don't want to include your walk around in your video that you send to me, that's okay. The pre-drive checks and adjustments in the car is probably the most important thing. So I'll just go through this like I have a couple students, and I'm going through first day pre-drive checks and adjustments. We've already gone through, if they have their permit, I've checked their permits for their permit number, written that down. I've checked their contact information, their phone number, to make sure that's correct as well. Maybe getting a secondary phone number. If I have moms, maybe I'm getting dads. Again, not getting the student's phone number. We do not want to directly contact students unless we are also including the parents in on that text message or whatever. So we want to make sure we have too deep communication. First thing we want to go through is just make sure we talk to the students about what we're going to be doing on that drive. Okay, just so they have an idea. It doesn't have to be too in depth. You don't want to take 10 minutes to explain every detail of what you're going to do on that drive. Just a basic overview of the drive and maybe some of the skills that they're going to be working on. Okay. The pre-drive walk around. You want to walk around the car every drive, but you don't have to go through as much depth. Maybe after the first drive. Maybe after the first drive, you question them and ask them what are the things we should be checking. See if they remember. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started up today. First thing, this is drive one. So drive one, we're going to be working on pre-drive checks and adjustments. So every time we get into the car, before we drive, we want to make sure that we're taking a few minutes. Today it'll be a few minutes. After that, it'll just be a few seconds, maybe a minute at the most, to make sure everything inside the car is properly checked and adjusted before we drive. We'll also do a walk around of the car today before we get in that we'll do each drive to make sure everything on the outside of the car looks safe and secure. Then once we start driving today, we'll be working in a residential neighborhood, working on some of our basic skills, working on backing out of a parking spot, backing out of a driveway. We'll also work on two-way and four-way stop right-of-way. We'll also work on speed control and sign observation. Some of those things we work on every single drive. So this is kind of an introductory drive where you can kind of feel out the students and see where they're at as far as skills. You don't want to try to cover too much in case the student hasn't had much practice. So you're just kind of feeling them out a little bit. Again, trying to build their confidence a little bit with some basic skills that you can build on the next drive and all the drives after that. So first thing we'll do is we'll do our walk around. So we just want to check a couple things and make sure, again, everything on the car is safe and secure. So we can check the front of the car, check the headlights, make sure there's no cracked headlights. We'll go through headlight controls, make sure all the headlights work and the turn signals work as we go through pre-drive checks and adjustments here a little bit later. When we walk around the car, then we want to look at the tires. So we want to look and see if the tires look low. Most cars now are going to have low tire pressure lights that'll tell you if a tire is low. But you can always look on the outside anyway. See if you have any hubcaps that are broken, anything like that. If you're borrowing mom or dad's car, you don't want them to think that you put a dent or a scratch in it when you brought it back. So if there's anything wrong with it, you can tell them before you take the car versus they find it after you drove the car and then you have to try to figure out who put the dent or the scratch in the car. So we just want to check the sidewalls for any damage. We want to check for any low tires. At some point, you can check for tread depth, but you'll talk about that more in the class. Later, you want to make sure you have enough tread on your tires. We won't go into too much detail about that today. If a tire is low, if you have a tire that looks low or your tire pressure light is on, you can go through how to check tire pressure with students. So you just want to show them, I usually show them on the first day. If you open up the driver's side door on the door jamb, there's a sticker that tells them what the tire pressure should be. Sometimes some cars have front and rear tire pressure that's a little bit different. This car, it's the same. Most cars, it's right around 33 PSI or pounds per square inch. Somewhere between 30 and 35 is usually where you want to be for that. So if they forget or don't look, what they don't want to do is look at the number on the side of the tire. That's the maximum pressure. So that could be 50 pounds of pressure, which would be too much to just drive around on a daily basis. Okay. Again, checking your mirrors, see if you have anything that's cracked, anything that's broken. This car is missing a little cover for our antenna, so that's good to see. As we walk around the back of the car, if you don't walk around your car every single drive, it's good to at least take 2 steps and look behind your car. So if you're parked in your driveway and you're going to back out of your driveway, it's good to take those 2 steps and just make sure that your little brother or sister hasn't left their scooter or bicycle or anything behind the car. Again, there's a lot of cars that don't have backup cameras, so you won't see that stuff unless you take 2 steps and look, right? Obviously looking behind our car, see if there's anything else, anybody else is getting in their car that's going to be backing up at the same time we're backing up. We're not going to be backing up for a while, so that's okay. As we come around the back of the car again, you do want to check your tail lights and turn signals. At some point, we're not going to do that right now. You can turn your hazards on. We'll talk about hazards and flashers later. And then you can walk around the car and check your turn signal lights. You have to have somebody to push on the brake to check your brake lights. You can always back up to a garage door, push on your brake lights, and see if they both line up. One thing that's good to check periodically is make sure that your tag or your sticker on your license plate is current. So this one is good through April of 2023. You might want to talk to them about what the registration is. We can go through that when we get in the car. And they do have 30 days after this sticker expires, although you don't want to push it because you will get a ticket if you don't change that sticker on time. So, and as we walk around the car, it's the same thing on this side. The tire that you definitely want to check is the driver's side front tire. If you're going to bump a curb or rub your tire up against a curb and cause sidewall damage, it's going to be this right front tire. Okay, we've had multiple. You can see there's some curb rash on this hubcap, wheel cover. But we've had multiple cars come in and they've had cuts or bubbles where you've hit a curb and it's caused a weak spot on the sidewall. So you definitely want to check that before you go out. Okay, this one has a cracked side mirror right there that we'll have to get repaired. All right, any questions about anything on the outside of the car? No. All right, so each drive we can alternate who goes first, or we can decide before each drive. Would either of you, if you have less experience or if you're not as comfortable, would either of you rather not drive first today?
I'd rather not.
Okay, so whoever's not driving, go ahead and sit in the back seat on the driver's side. That way I can see you and talk to you as we drive as well as the driver, okay? And you can go ahead and hop in the driver's side. We'll go ahead and get started with our inside pre-drive checks and adjustments. So first thing before we start going through pre-drive checks and adjustments is distractions. So we want to put our cell phone someplace where it's not going to be a distraction as we're driving. So it's always good to put your phone on driving mode if your phone has that, or do not disturb, or mute, or obviously you could turn it off, or whatever you want to do so it's not a distraction as you're driving. Where would be a good place to put your phone? Maybe there's a couple different options. So it's not, the best thing would be out of sight, out of mind. So it's not sitting in the cup holder right next to you. It's not in your lap, somewhere where you can grab it easily if it does vibrate or ring.
Maybe in here, or maybe in the glove box.
Okay, yep, glove box would be a good place. It's secure there. You could still get to it if you needed to, if there was an emergency. Same thing with the center console. You can still get to it there. And again, when I ask questions, I'm asking both of you, right? Even if you're not driving, you can answer questions. So, Hannah, where do you think might be another good place to put your phone?
Maybe in the side door.
Okay, you could put it in the side door. Again, the problem is there, you might easily grab it, if it does start to vibrate or whatever. That's not the worst place in the world. A lot of people say they'd put them in their purse or they'd put them in their backpack. Some people say they'd throw them in the trunk. I don't know if you want to put it in the trunk or not. That might be a little extreme. But you just want to get in the habit of putting it in the same place. So a lot of safe driving is just developing good safe habits. And so if you just get in the habit of putting on do not disturb, putting it in driving mode, putting it in the center console, or putting it in your backpack, then you won't get caught up with looking at your phone, you know, or being tempted to do that as you're driving. They say that drivers 23 times more likely to get into a crash if they're texting on their phone. A lot of states, Iowa does not, but a lot of states, you have to use hands-free or Bluetooth to even make a phone call on your phone. But when you're under 18, you cannot touch a cell phone while you're driving. So if you need to use your cell phone, what should you do if you're driving down the road and you need to make a phone call or send a text message?
Pull over.
Yeah, park the car, right? Pull into a parking lot, park the car. You know, if you're a residential neighborhood, pull over on the side of the street and park. Put the car in park though. Don't do it at a stoplight, right? Or a stop sign. You know, and then you don't see the light, you don't see what's going on, and causes problems there. So let's go ahead and we'll turn our phones off or put them on do not disturb or whatever, and we'll put them in the center console. Do you guys don't have your phone? All right, Hannah's got her phone, so we'll stick it in here. Good. All right, we'll get that back to you later. So when we switch every half an hour, if you guys do need to make a phone call or you know, send a text message, we can always do it when we park and switch. I have no problem with that. That's when I'll check my phone is when we park and switch if I need to, you know, contact my wife or something. So, all right, good. So we're going to go through our pre-drive checks and adjustments. This is something you want to do each drive before you start driving. You don't want to just hop in your car and take off driving, especially if you're borrowing a car from your mom or dad. You share a car with your brother or sister, because they're going to have their seat and steering wheel and mirrors and everything adjusted a little bit differently than you do. And you don't want to drive down the road and then figure out that your mirrors aren't adjusted right. You can't see things like you should be able to. So it only takes, once you get going, it only takes probably 15-20 seconds to go through all of these. Okay. All right. So if you want to go ahead and start the car, it's getting a little warm in here, so we'll go ahead and start it, and we'll get the air flowing just a little bit so we don't get too warm. Yep. And just let me know if you get too warm or too cold. I can always adjust the heat so you don't have to do that while you're driving. And then we'll turn the radio off. We won't have that on because I'll be talking most of the time when we're driving anyway. All right, so everybody good with the temperature?
I'm gonna go.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so there's an acronym that'll help you remember the things that you need to check or adjust before you start driving, and the acronym is SMILE. So hopefully it's easy to remember. You know, you're happy to get your license or your school permit so your parents don't have to drive you around all the time. You have some freedom. So you get in the car, you're able to drive yourself, and so you smile, right? Because you're happy to be able to drive. So the S in SMILE stands for seatbelt, steering wheel. The M stands for mirrors. The I is instrument panel, which is your gauges around your speedometer. The L is your lights, so like your headlights. And the E is the emergency brake, okay? So we'll go through each one of these in detail. Just ask me if you have any questions about anything as we go through them, okay? So the first one is seat. So there's a couple different adjustments for the seat. The first one you want to adjust is the forward and backwards distance from the pedal. So we're adjusting the seat to the pedals and not the steering wheel, because the steering wheel adjustment is a separate adjustment that we'll do later, okay? So if there's a bar underneath your seat, so if you just grab onto that bar, pull it up, and then your seat will slide. If you grab the steering wheel, your seat belt will slide, or your seat will slide forward or backwards. So you want to adjust your seat forward and backwards so you have just a little bit of bend in your knee. You should be able to touch the floor behind the brake pedal. If you can't touch the floor behind the brake pedal, you might be a little too far away. Yep, and the goal here is that we can quickly move our foot from the gas to the brake. So if we're too close or too far away, we might have to pick our foot up off the floor to move it from the gas to the brake. So we always want our heel behind the brake pedal, and we tilt our foot over to the right towards the gas pedal, because it's a lot quicker to go to the gas or to go to the brake pedal and slow down and stop if our heel is behind the brake and not over to the right behind the gas pedal. Okay. We always want to drive with one foot. We want to drive with our right foot. We don't want to drive with 2 feet for a couple different reasons that we won't get into today. Yep. All right. Any questions about the distance? Does that feel comfortable? It looks like you have a good amount of knee bend there. You don't have to pick your foot up off the floor to move from the gas to the brake, so that's good. You know, if we start driving and you feel like you need to adjust it, anytime we come to a stop sign or a stoplight, you can take a second or two and adjust your seat just a little bit. But then anytime we adjust the seat, we'll probably have to recheck our mirrors, see if we need to readjust our mirrors, okay? There's a lever, there's 2 levers on the left-hand side of your seat. The one towards the front on the left-hand side adjusts the height of your seat up and down. So if you keep pulling up on that lever, it keeps raising the seat up. So a lot of students like to sit up as high as they can so they can have a better view, have a little bit more vision over the dash and the hood of the car. Okay, I'm a little taller, so I usually lower the seat down as much as I can because if I don't, when I turn my head to the right, my rear view mirror actually acts as a blind spot. Okay. All right. Looks good. Yep, you're up about as high as you can get. And again, that's a little personal preference, but again, a lot of people like to see a little bit better over the dash and the hood. And then the lever towards the back on the left-hand side is your tilt. So a lot of people think the tilt is just kind of for comfort or personal preference, and it is to a certain extent, but there's also a safety aspect to that as well, because your headrest is attached to the back of your seat. And so what can happen is if you tilt your seat back too far, and then when you drive, if you lean forward just a little bit so your back isn't touching the back of the seat, then your head is too far away from your head restraint. So if you get rear-ended, somebody hits you from behind, the head restraint is not close enough to your head to protect from whiplash, right? So rear end collisions are the most common type of collision where somebody hits another person from behind, which means whiplash and neck injuries are the most common injuries in car crashes. So we want to make sure we do everything we can to prevent any neck injuries from whiplash. So, you know, odds are if you get into any crashes in your life, it'll probably be a rear end collision where somebody hits you from behind, okay? All right, so once we've adjusted the tilt of the seat so your shoulder blades are touching the back of the seat, then we want to check our headrest. This is the one that's easy to forget because it's behind you. So you just want to kind of push your head back and feel where that's at, where you can kind of feel where the top of the headrest is at. So a good general rule is that you want the top of the headrest even with the top of your head. So as long as it's pretty close to the top of your head, you should be okay. What you don't want is if you're taller like I am, to have it too low where your head could go up and over the headrest. So it's not keeping your head from going backwards in a rear end collision. So, and then if you want to lower your headrest, it's kind of awkward. You have to push the button on the left hand side. Yep, you have to push that button and push down, and then it goes down. If you want to raise it, you just grab it with 2 hands and pull up, and it should just click as it goes up. And then if you want to lower it, just push the button and push down. You always want to make sure it clicks and kind of locks into that next position. All right, so we've got our seat adjusted correctly. Now our seat belt. So when we put our seat belt on, there are some adjustments that go along with that as well. So when you hear that seat belt click, that's your reminder to check everybody else in the car, because as the driver, you're responsible for your passengers, right? And if you have a younger brother or sister or niece or nephew or something like that, you're babysitting, if you have somebody in the back seat that's under the age of 14, who gets the ticket? The driver gets the ticket, right? And it's a more expensive ticket. It's almost $200 if you have an unbuckled child under the age of 14 in the car with you. They should be in the back seat if they're under 14 as well, okay? All right, so everybody has their seatbelt on. Oh, no. So you always want to check your, so don't ask them, because they might say, oh yeah, I have my seatbelt on, but they don't want to put it on, right? So you're going to have friends or maybe family members that say, well, I'm in the back seat, you know, I don't need to wear my seatbelt because I'm in the back seat, right? So remember, everybody in the car wearing their seatbelt all the time is for everybody's safety. So if the person sitting in the back seat doesn't have their seatbelt on and you get into a crash, where are they going to go? They're going to go forward, right? So they could put your safety in danger as well if they don't have their seatbelt on, right? So one person in the car unbuckled could fly around the car and hurt everybody else in the car, right? The most likely person to not wear a seatbelt in a car is a teenage passenger. So you've got to make sure you check your passengers. If a teenager is killed in a car crash, about 66% of the time, about 2/3 of the time, they're not buckled up, right? So you want to make sure your passengers, everybody in the car, whether they're teenagers or older, right? Everybody is buckled up. That's the most important thing for your safety, okay? No excuses. And if they say they don't want to buckle up, tell them to get out of your car, right? So you're the boss, you're the captain of your ship, so you make the rules. Okay, so the other thing about your seatbelt, you want to make sure that it's not twisted. So sometimes when you put it on, the bottom part gets twisted up and that cuts the surface area down. So you want to make sure it's lying flat across the bottom and across your chest. Okay, you want to make sure it's low. So a lot of times, people in the back seat at least, maybe not so much the driver, can kind of slouch in their seat, and now the seatbelt goes up across kind of their belly button or abdomen area, and that can cause damage in a crash. So you want to make sure, just like your upper back is touching the back of the seat, you want to make sure your lower back is touching the back of the seat as well. And then I always give a little tug across the top of the seat belt just to make sure everything's nice and snug. In a crash, cars have seat belt pretensioners anyway that tighten the seat belts up, so it's probably not extremely necessary to do that. The other adjustment for your seat belt is on the side here. So if you're taller, you want to raise this adjustment up so it goes up and over your shoulder. It doesn't fall off the side of your shoulder. If you're shorter, you can push that button and lower it down so it's not too high and kind of cutting up into your neck, okay? And again, if you get driving and things don't feel quite right, you stop at a stoplight or a stop sign, you can always make a quick adjustment for a second or so. All right, so that's your seat belt. So we got seat belt. The last one is the steering wheel. So if you take your left thumb and stick it underneath the steering wheel on what's called the steering column, usually there's a lever you can feel with your thumb that you pull down towards the floor. Sometimes you can't see it very well. Yep, that's it right there. And now you can adjust the steering wheel up and down as well as in and out. It's called a telescoping steering wheel. Okay, so if you have to move your seat forward, and this one might not have it. So most cars do have a telescoping steering wheel. So if you scoot your seat forward, you can push the steering wheel away from you to make sure you have a safe distance, okay? So as far as the height of the steering wheel, you want to make sure you can see through the steering wheel to see your whole speedometer. You don't want to have to duck your head to see how fast you're going. A good general rule is the top of the steering wheel is about even with the top of your shoulders. You just don't want the steering wheel up too high, and then when you turn the steering wheel, you have to reach up higher, or the airbag could potentially come up towards your face. If you get into a collision, you want that airbag to come out towards your body, and then your whole body will go, forward and down into the airbag. Okay. All right. As far as the distance away from the steering wheel, you want to be at least 10 inches because the airbag, again, in a front crash, the airbag will come out about 10 inches. So you probably don't carry a measuring tape in your car, but a good general rule for this is if you stick one of your arms straight out over the steering wheel, your wrist should be about over the top of the steering wheel, okay? So, if you stick your arm out and the steering wheel is in between your elbow and your wrist, you're probably too close, right? So again, another way to visualize that is a sheet of paper is about 11 inches, so that's about 10 inches, right? You can kind of visualize the distance of a sheet of paper in between you, okay? That's also good for steering wheel control. If you're too far away and you have to reach for the steering wheel, or if you're too close and your arms are all bent up, then you can't turn and control the steering wheel in the car as efficiently as well. All right, any questions on the steering wheel?
Is it okay if it
touches your knees?
Yeah.
Yep, so that's a good question. It kind of depends on where you put your left foot. So if you put your left foot down over to the left on that pad, sometimes it's called the dead pedal, then usually it's not an issue. And again, if your right foot's on the gas pedal, then usually, or the brake, then it's usually not an issue. But if you're taller, you might need to raise the steering wheel up so it's not bumping into your knees. So that's a great question. Yeah, and that would probably be more important than maybe having it up a little higher where the airbag might, you know, potentially be a problem. Yep, exactly. Okay, so we've got seatbelt, steering wheel. Okay, do you remember what the next word or M word is?
Mirrors.
Mirrors, good. So just like when we check them, we'll adjust them in the same order. So we'll adjust our rear view mirror first. So we want to be able to see as much out of the back window as possible. Usually if we can see the very top or the headrest of the back seat, that'll give us the best angle to see out the back. Again, we want to see both side pillars on the back. So these things that hold the roof up are called the side pillars. So they're lettered. This is the A pillar and the B pillar and the C pillars in the back. There is a tab on some cars, so when you're driving at night you can flip that tab, and so you're not blinded by the cars that are coming up behind you. A lot of newer cars, they have a sensor and they do this automatically, so you don't have to mess with the tab. Okay. During the day you flip it down, you just see the back of the seat, so it only works at night really. So, all right, so for the side mirrors, we're going to adjust them with what's called the blind spot glare elimination method. And so this method is going to make your blind spot smaller. So when you go to change lanes, you can see a car coming up, you know, closer to your driver's side door a little bit more. And at night, when cars pull up beside you, you're not going to be blinded by their headlights in your side mirror quite as long. There's still going to be a little bit of time where you can see their headlights in your side mirror. So in order to do this, so first of all, on your door panel, there's a L for left and an R for right, and you can see the up, down, left, and right arrows. So we're going to adjust our left or driver's side mirror first. Yep, so just flip that over to L, and then we're going to lean our head over so it touches or almost touches your window, and then we're going to adjust our side mirror out so we can just barely see the edge of the car, maybe the back door handle. Yep. And then as far as up and down, usually you know, where the window meets the door, usually that's about in the middle of your mirror. And again, when you get to a stoplight and there's cars around you, you might have to make a small adjustment if it's a little too high or a little too low for what you want to see. Can you see the side of the car when you lean over? Okay. Yep. Good. So the point is, when you're not leaned over, so when you're sitting in your driving position and you just kind of glance over at your side mirrors, you cannot see the side of your own car. Okay. And for some people that seems weird because they don't have a point of reference. They're not used to not seeing the side of their own car. But we'll do a blind spot check activity a little bit later, and you'll see how you can see me walking up beside the car. You'll be able to see cars coming up beside you a lot further. So if you're merging onto the interstate or making lane changes, you can see that car before you check your blind spot. Some people forget to check their blind spot. This car does not have blind spot detector mirrors or lights. That'll help you out, so it's even more important to make sure your side mirrors are adjusted correctly in this car. So same thing with your passenger side mirror. So just flip it to R for right, and then lean over towards your mirror a few inches, and then adjust it out so you can just barely see the edge of your car. And again, where the window meets the door is about halfway through your mirror. And again, so when you're sitting in your driving position and you just glance at your side mirrors, you should not be able to see the side of your own car. All right, very good. So we got seatbelt, steering wheel, mirrors. I is the instrument panel. This is probably the hardest one to remember. Instrument panel is like where your gauges and things. So your fuel gauge, your temperature gauge. You know, some vehicles might have other gauges on there as well. The one to the left is called the tachometer, which you really don't need. It shows you the engine speed. It's really kind of unnecessary. And then you want to make sure you look at your speedometer. This car does not have a digital speedometer. It just has the speedometer with a needle, and it's got your speed every 20 miles per hour. So you kind of have to look at it closely to see if you're going 25 or 30 or 35, because all the numbers aren't there. All right, so just every car is a little bit different on how the speedometer is. Okay, so if you go ahead and turn the car off for just a second. Yep, and then just turn the key to the first position. Second position, I'm sorry. So first position is called the accessories, where the radio works. Second position is actually the run position, but the car is not actually started. When you first turn that key on, all your instrument panel lights will come on. So you can see there's a kind of orangish yellow check engine light. There's a red, looks like an oil can, oil pressure light. There's a red, looks like a battery, so that's a battery charging system light. You'll go through all those symbols in the online class. So there's 3 different colors for those, just like a stoplight. Red, if a red light comes on, you need to find the closest place you can stop, a parking lot or a side street, because if you keep driving, your car might stop running or you could damage the car. If a yellow light comes on, that just means it's a warning, there's a hazard, something that's important that you check. You don't have to pull over and check it right away, but you want to try to check it as soon as you can. If your check engine light comes on, you can pull into any auto parts store and they can scan it and tell you what might be wrong with your car. They can't tell you exactly. If a green light is on, that just tells you that something is on. Your cruise control is on, your headlights are on. We'll go through headlight positions here in just a second. And there's only one blue light that maybe you haven't seen before, and we'll go through that when we go through your lights as well. Okay, so you can go ahead and start the car again. You'll see all those lights will come on. Yep, and then they should go back off again, and they were already on. So if you're driving down the road and one of those lights comes on that wasn't on before, you'll hear a little bell noise. So you'll be driving down the road and it'll go ding. So that's trying to get your attention to look at your instrument panel and see what light has come on. Is it a check engine light? Is it a low tire pressure light? Okay, so the low tire pressure light's a pretty important one. So that one is down at the bottom right with the exclamation point in it. It's supposed to be like a cross section of a tire. A lot of people don't quite see that, and so they don't know what that is. So if that light comes on, I would check that right away, because you don't know if your tire is leaking a little bit, if it's a little bit low, or if it's flat, right? So it could be flat. You don't want to drive down the road with a flat tire. So sorry, I'm reaching in your space there. So that brings up a good point. Don't reach into the student's space. Okay, so where the center console is, there's a line, right, an invisible line right down the middle of the car. You don't want to reach across that invisible line and enter the student's space, right? We don't want to make the student feel uncomfortable. We don't want to reach across them to show them where stuff is at, right? Our face is getting close to their face, right? Crystal's probably can tell what kind of coffee I had this morning or whatever, right? So just don't do that, right? So use your words and explain it versus reaching across into that student space, right? Okay. All right, so we've got seat belt, steering wheel, mirrors, instrument panel. Do you remember what the L was for? Lights, good. Yep, the lights. So these are going to be specifically our headlights, right? Not our interior lights in the car, but our headlights. Okay. Now I purposely parked in front of the door and the windows here so we can see the lights as we go through the different light settings. You might not be able to do that, but if there's a place where you can park so the students can see that, if not, it's a good idea to get out of the car, right, and show the students the daytime running lights, the parking lights, the low and high beams, what they look like. Okay, so they actually know. Again, don't hurry through this. Take your time. You know, just because it seems simple to us doesn't mean, you know, it makes sense and the students understand it. Okay. All right. So your headlights are on this car, at least, and a lot of cars are on your turn signal switch, which is that lever that comes out from the left-hand side. So this car has them pretty well labeled. Some cars don't, and you have to kind of guess. So it's kind of like a light switch. All the way down is off. You can see the off. Sometimes it'll be an O or a dot that'll symbolize the off. And all the way up is on, okay? And by on, I mean your low beam headlights, okay? Or they could be your high beams if we bump them, right? So let's go ahead and start at the bottom. So we'll start with our headlights off. First position up, DRL, stands for daytime running lights. So these lights are not bright enough to drive at night, but during the day, you know, if it's a little overcast, people can see you coming a little bit better. It's the same concept as a motorcycle headlight. Motorcycles are harder to see, so they want to be seen. You cannot turn a headlight off on a motorcycle. So it's the same thing. Most of the time when people get into a crash, the state troopers that have come into my classes say, people say, I never saw him, right? So you want to make yourself visible. So if you turn your daytime running lights on, or even your low beam headlights during the day, people have a better chance of seeing you, right? This is a white car. If we're driving in the snow in the winter, people might not see us, right? If it's nighttime or getting dark and you have a black car, if it's an overcast day and you have a gray car, people are gonna have a hard time seeing you, right? So always try to drive with something on, daytime running lights, even parking lights. Some cars integrate the parking lights into the daytime running lights. So the next position up, if you just twist your knob, those are the parking lights. You can see the orange turn signal lights came on. With some cars, it's just the orange turn signal lights and not the daytime running lights. Okay, and some cars integrate the two together. It just depends on the car. Okay, so parking lights were supposed to be if you're in a parking lot with no lights, so people could see, and it's at night, so people could see you, so it's your tail lights and your front turn signal lights. Okay, sometimes you'll see people driving with these on at night because they think they have their headlights on because their instrument panel light is lit up, but really it's not their nighttime low beams. Okay, and then all the way up, these are the low beams. Okay, and this symbol kind of looks like the high beam symbol, except the lines go down at a little bit of an angle. And then if you want to turn your high beam headlights on, so if you're out in the country, there's no cars around, and you want to see farther down the road, so if a deer runs out in front of you, you can see it earlier, you can brake earlier and get slowed down so you don't hit it. So think about it this way: you want to look farther down the road, so you want to push that turn signal switch forward to see farther down the road. And you can see there's your high beam headlights. Okay, so go ahead and pull it back and that shuts them off. If you're ever driving down the road and somebody's driving towards you and they forget to dim their high beams, just pull back on your turn signal lever and that'll flash your high beams real quick, and that should signal them to dim their high beams. Some people don't understand what you're trying to tell them. Or if somebody's driving with no headlights, you can flash your high beams, or you can just flash your low beams on and off. Again, they might not understand what you're trying to tell them, but at least you tried, right? All right, so it's a little bit overcast today. It's not really, it's a little cloudy. What do you think we should probably have our headlights set on today?
Maybe the first setting.
Yep.
Daytime running.
Yep,
lights.
daytime running lights today would be just fine. Yep. Now if it's completely sunny out, I mean, you're probably fine with no headlights, but again, those daytime running lights will last for years and years. You don't have to worry about changing them. They're made to last forever, or not forever, but for a long time. So it doesn't hurt anything to turn them on and drive with them on all the time. Okay. All right, since we're talking about levers around your steering wheel, so if you turn your wheel a little bit to the right, and again, I'm reaching across kind of into the driver's space, so I shouldn't do that. You can see this lever on the right has some symbols and some words on it as well. In this car, this is your windshield wiper switch. Let's just go through that real quickly. So again, it's labeled, right? So right now it's in the off position. If you push up, it'll just go once. So if you have a real light mist, a real light rain, you want to just go once, just push up, okay? Yep. The first position down, you can see it says INT. INT stands for intermittent. Intermittent means they'll go once and then they'll pause. And then they'll go again and they'll pause. And you can change the length of that pause with this knob, right? So, and you can see in this car, all the way up is a short pause. So if it's raining a little bit harder, all the way down is a long pause. So I usually put it in the middle. It kind of splits the difference. If it's raining hard enough that you want them on all the time, that first position down from there is low, all the way down is high, and then to shut them off, just push them all the way up. Yep, yep, good. And every car is different, so you want to make sure, yep, and if you pull back towards you, it sprays the windshield wiper fluid, so if your windshield is dirty or a little bit of frost on it in the morning or whatever, okay? Again, every car is a little bit different, so your mom's car might be different from your dad's car, so you want to make sure you go through that before you take off driving. Okay, again, you don't want to drive down the road and you can't figure out how to use the windshield wipers if it starts raining. Okay.
I need my phone.
Okay. All right. There you go. Okay, so we've got seat belt, steering wheel, mirrors, instrument panel, lights. The last one is the emergency brake. So there's a little pedal. Some cars have a little pedal over to the left-hand side, and it says push on and then push off. So you push it and it'll click a bunch of times, and then there's a little light that comes on, little red light that says brake, and then you push it again to release it. This car, a lot of smaller cars, compact cars, have a center console parking brake. Okay, so you just grab that handle and just pull it up as hard as you can. It'll click a bunch of times and then it'll lock. Okay, and there should be a red brake light, so it'll have a P for parking brake, and it'll also have an exclamation point for emergency brake. It's the same brake, so if your regular brakes don't work, you can use this to stop. If you're parked on a little bit of an incline like this, and you put the car in park and it kind of rolls backwards, that's an indication you want to use your parking brake. Okay, so any type of incline, a hill, right, you want to try to use that. So it can be a little tricky to disengage, so you want to push on the button and pull up at the same time. Yep, and then all the way back down. Good. Yep, good. All right. There's a couple other things that we'll go through a little bit later. You have visors up here. We'll talk about those. If the sun is in your eyes, right? Cruise control setting, we can talk about that when we go out on the interstate. Your hazards or flashers. So again, that's a good way to check your turn signal lights to see if you have a turn signal that's burnt out. In some cars, if you turn your turn signal on, it flashes faster. That's telling you that you have a turn signal light that's burnt out. So you need to turn your hazards on, walk around your car and see which one's burnt out. Okay. All right. And again, if it gets fogged up, if it's raining, we might want to turn our defrost. There's our front defrost. The one that's more rectangular, square shaped is the rear defrost. So if it's frosty in the winter, sometimes you can do defrost and down by your feet. Just kind of depends on what you prefer. Okay, so I think we had it on vent here and down at our feet. And again, there's knobs that cut off the circulation, so there's not as much blowing on you. You can adjust these up or down however you want them. All right, any questions on any of those pre-drive checks and adjustments?
How do I shift?
Yep, so good. Shifting, and we'll get into that when we go ahead and back out and work on backing out of our parking space. But yeah, we'll go through the shifter. We'll go through steering wheel control before we go out. We'll go over backing out of our parking spot, and how to do that correctly next. So you can always quiz students after that, and just say, okay, let's just review what does SMILE stand for, and then on every drive, just kind of quiz them. And watch them to make sure they're adjusting all those things. And if they don't, then say, okay, what was our pre-drive checks and adjustments? What was our acronym? Why do we need to make sure we adjust this? What's the safety aspect involved in that? So you can also go through, so along with their driver's license, they can get a ticket for not having their driver's license on them if they get into a collision or get pulled over for speeding or something. It's always good to go through the registration, what that looks like. So again, that's the tag. The sticker on the back of the license plate comes on the registration. That's once a year. You want to make sure that this is in the car. If it's not, it might be in their mom's purse, or their dad might have it in his wallet. So you want to make sure they have a copy of it or have it in the car, or take a picture of it, right? Same thing with your insurance card. Make sure that's up to date. Take a picture of it. Take a picture of their driver's license. Law enforcement will take pictures. Iowa is going to an electronic driver's license at some point. They just haven't gotten around to it yet. So you do not have to cancel a drive if a student shows up after the first drive with their permit. As long as you've seen their permit, you know they have their permit. If they forget it, just tell them if something happens, they get pulled over, they can get a ticket for it. They can go to the court office and have the ticket expunged or thrown out if they show the judge they have a permit. So it's not a huge deal. So, all right. So I'm sure there's a few things I've forgotten here, but we don't go over buttons on the steering wheel and stuff. You can go through that. You can go through interior lights and some of those other things. But again, you want to try to be as efficient with your time as you can, and not go through maybe things that aren't quite as important. We usually pop the hood, go through some things there on a different drive. Again, this takes quite a bit of time, so we don't want to spend the whole half an hour not driving, right? So maybe this takes 15 minutes to go through, and we spend the next 15 minutes on steering wheel control, backing out of our parking spot, maybe a little bit of residential driving, and then we switch, do the same thing on that first half an hour, just to kind of get them warmed up. They're going to be nervous on that first drive, so you don't want to just jump in the car and head out and try to do a whole bunch of stuff and maybe overwhelm them if they haven't driven too much. So, all right, you guys have anything to add that maybe I missed or didn't elaborate on enough? You guys have done this much more than I have, so.
Do you go over like front defrost and rear defrost?
Yeah, yep. So, and again, I usually adjust things. I usually ask the students, or tell them if they get hot or cold to let me know, so they don't have to try to adjust it as we're driving. But yeah, going through the defrost settings is good, so they know what those symbols are. They should go through it. In the online class, it has that as well.
Flashers.
Yep, hazards or flashers. Yep. that's good to go through as well. You could always go through, like your temperature. Your temperature gauge is usually at the middle between hot and cold, maybe 1 bar, just a little bit below the middle. Not a huge deal. If it goes up above, a lot of times the temperature symbol will come on, and then it's red, they want to pull over. But I don't get into trip odometers and every little detail, because it's not really directly affecting their safety necessarily. If they ask about it, we can take time and go through it. But again, if it's not affecting their safety, then it's probably not the most important thing to go through, at least on that first day. Maybe you can talk about it later if it comes up or it's needed. So, all right. So that's basically it for pre-drive checks and adjustments. Just let me know if there's any questions you have or anything else you think should be added or included in that. So, all right. Thanks.